Good morning. The first thing I want to say is thank you, Darren, for inviting me to talk about what LCRIG are doing. I also want to say a huge thank you to many people in this room. This is my first TTF conference, and what a welcome I've had. Thank you, HRS, for hosting me on your table last night. I have had the most fabulous time. If I had known how amazing these conferences are before, I think I would have been a real advocate. So what I really wanted to talk about is a lot of people know LCRIG for the events that it organises, but part of what I'll be doing at LCRIG is taking the importance of what we do and the knowledge that we're gathering and turning that into really interesting and useful information for our local authority members, for our supply chain members, and I'll be working closely with government. I think it's also fair to say that, again, what I found really, really interesting from yesterday is the sort of the interaction that's happening between local authorities and suppliers, local authorities to local authorities. And one of the biggest challenges with all of the sort of the policy that we're seeing coming into local government is how do you actually get what Coventry did into Blackburn? How do you actually get what you've seen in, London Borough of Hillingdon through into, Croydon Council. And part of my role is to really understand what is the nub of what happened in one local authority that means we can transfer that into other local authorities. We know, for example, that, and the reason that it's so small here, and it's just been referred to, every piece of policy that's coming out from around local government, around communities, around everything, is something that all councils are going to be grappling with. Many councils are doing it very, very well. Some councils haven't even started on their journey. Now, what is it about how we can help those that are in different stages of their journey for implementing technology and transport, through to policies around active travel? How do you encourage communities that perhaps have a level of suspicion about local authorities? We heard yesterday about technology, but if there's anything we've learned from the pandemic, there are some communities who were very, very concerned about the level of technology that's being applied in their sort of communities. There's a move away from some parts of communities not using apps. So again, I shall be spending my time looking at different local authorities, looking at different communities within those local authorities, and helping LCRIG and others really share that knowledge. Because I think what tends to happen is we see really good case studies, we see really interesting pieces of good practice, but taking the tacit piece of what's happening in people's heads, how did you actually implement this policy in this local authority, and how did you make it work here, takes that sort of research piece into that applied research, solving the problems on the ground. Because quite often in my previous roles in policy, research, and helping councils around innovation, is that nub of what was the trigger, what was that small thing. So I'm a naturally curious person. So if you come across me and I'm asking you lots of questions, it's because I really want to understand what you did as a supply chain to work with local authorities, what you did as local authorities to local authorities. Was there a political change that caused something? Was there a failure in another part of the local authority? Because that's how we make sure that we get some of this good practice. Because it's great we've got so many people here, but there's a lot of local authorities that are not here. How do we really make sure that we can take the knowledge of what you guys are doing and transmit that to a much, much wider audience? Now, I think the other key thing for me, and I'll be working closely with Darren and others from TTF, is that there is so much going on. What priority do you start things? Because I think sometimes there can come a stage where people think about transformation and change in a huge way. But actually, often it's about micro innovations, micro sort of changes that become the whole of the part. And again, I'm really keen, working with TTF and LCRIG, to make sure that we also highlight those small pieces of micro innovations. Those things that helped local authority are going to help local authority to become more technology aware around encouraging people around different modes in active travel, how we encourage people to think more about how communities might be engaging in how EV charges are placed in more sort of diverse areas of a local authority. Because again, we can have great sort of policies, but it's when you're implementing it within a local authority. And having worked in local government, it changes into different organisations. So I think, you know, as I'm sort of new in post, 3 weeks, so I'm in listening mode, but I will be spending just some time with Darren and some of his colleagues looking at how I can support that process. And over the next 3 weeks, we'll be looking at the really practical ways that LCRIG can draw out what we're doing. We do that already through the extensive events that we do. We've got innovation events coming up where local authorities are actually allowing or sort of developing pots of money for innovation to be trialled on their networks. And we really want to facilitate that, but also then share that in a much, much wider sense. And again, from my perspective, I've worked with government for a number of years, and helping that sort of cross-reference between what is happening in a diverse community, how we make sure that the policy that Darren, colleagues, Carla, and everybody else are all trying to encourage, how do we really get the nub of that? I'm not there to replicate what is already happening, but what I am trying to do is also look at the authorities that are not here. What is it that they're doing or not doing that we can help there? And how can we make sure that, you know, the experience that I think is amazing at the Transport Technology Forum is something that really, really gets to other people, so that next year we have to have a much bigger venue. Next year, we have to have a lot more people talking about how did you get from your drones hub here to this point here? So I think this is just, thank you so much, Darren. I'm absolutely loving being here. I'm sorry if I'm over enthusiastic, but it's just been wonderful. I've loved hearing the conversations, you know, listening and chatting to colleagues at TRL, a number of the other suppliers in the room, and hearing these little conversations with councils and bringing those out so that it's more than just in this room is absolutely what I'm about. I'm really about making the case for local roads. Thank you.